All right. Well, it is 12 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started while folks are coming into the room. My name is Tracy Myers. I am the Executive Director of King County Play Equity Coalition, and I'm so excited to facilitate our second webinar about the possibilities of youth sports in Washington State. You'll note that this is a Zoom meeting format and not a webinar format. So we're asking if you could please stay muted. We also have closed the chat, but the Q&A is open. You can also keep your cameras off. We are recording, and you will have an opportunity to put questions in the Q&A, and we'll be taking those questions at the end of our panel discussion. The King County Play Equity Coalition formed 6 years ago, originally focused on addressing access to sport, play, and outdoor recreation in King County. However, around the state and around the country, really, the issues related to youth sports are so similar, and we believe that all youth in Washington State should have access to the transformative benefits of sport. The coalition hopes we can use these webinars to engage in some collective thinking and conversations about how to address common challenges across the state so that ultimately we can use sport as a space to support the holistic development and well-being of young people. I'm really excited today. We have some great guests here to talk about high-quality sports with trained coaches as a powerful tool to support youth well-being. So our agenda today is that I'm going to give a 5-minute overview that includes a summary of what we talked about last time and a brief introduction to the power and possibilities of youth sports. Then we'll hear from each other, our guests, each of our guests for 5 minutes, and we'll do some moderated questions, and then we'll ask you all to ask your questions. We think of youth sports as organized sports serving youth ages 6 through 18. We divide that into school sports, which in Washington State is overseen by the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, the WIAA. And we see non-school sport, which happens in a range of settings outside of the school. So here we are primarily focusing on non-school sports. However, you'll note that it can be challenging to talk about them separately for some of the topics we have today. So we showed these numbers last time, and we wanted to start with them again because when you see that over 50% of youth in our state play sports, it tells us how much benefit there could be for youth health and well-being if we thought of sport as an investment into holistic development for our young people. Last time, we talked about the lack of statewide data collection related to youth sports and how that limits our ability to tell a comprehensive story. However, a series of reports that you see here on this slide and anecdotal experiences, we have created a series of reports that tell us that 3 of the main challenges facing youth sports are a lack of access to places to play sports. Another challenge is the cost of sports and an overemphasis on winning and competition at younger and younger ages. So I'm going to turn to our panelists to talk to us more about these trends and the others that they are seeing from their unique vantage points. Before doing that, turning to what we know about the possibilities for youth sports in our state. First, we know that Washington State is looking for ways to bolster youth well-being. We currently rank 38th in the nation, and the governor has a strategic plan to improve this, which is stated right here, the Washington Thriving Strategic Plan, and high-quality youth sports could be a part of this plan. And the reason it could be part of this plan is because we know that high-quality youth sports can improve mental and physical well-being. So as you see on the slide, Washington State students who get 60 minutes of exercise 5 days a week or more are less likely to experience symptoms of depression and anxiety, than those who exercise less often. And involvement in school sports during adolescence is a statistically significant predictor of lower depression symptoms and lower perceived stress in young adulthood. And I keep saying this term high quality because we need to reiterate that not all sport experiences are created equal. Sports that focus too much on competition and winning at young ages can be detrimental to youth health, while sports led by caring, well trained coaches that focus on skill development, holistic growth, and fun can make a huge difference in kids' lives and their trajectories. So, our first speaker today is Erica Quam, who knows a lot about caring, well trained coaches. She was a head women's swimming coach at Washington State University for 9 years and now is the Pacific Northwest Partnership Manager for Positive Coaching Alliance, a nonprofit that trains coaches nationwide. Erica, thank you so much for being here and sharing about coaching and coach training.
Thank you, Tracy. Great to be here today and just talk about how coaches are at the center of every youth sports experience. And we know a high quality coach can shape a young person's mindset, help them develop skills, and impact their overall enjoyment of playing sports, not just for the season, but for life. And if you think back to your youth, to an adult who made a positive impact on you, for many of us, that person was a coach. Coaches not only teach sports fundamentals, they are role models, they are mentors and leaders who can create safe and inclusive spaces where young people feel comfortable learning, growing, and practicing new skills. At Positive Coaching Alliance, we want to ensure that all coaches are trained in positive youth development because we know that that's where youth can thrive when they feel safe, seen, heard, and valued. And the research is clear that positive youth development outcomes and character development are optimized through positive relationships with adult leaders. And that's the foundation of quality coaching. It's really built on trust. So PCA helps develop competitors through positive coaching. It's not necessarily an either or, it's both positive and competitive. Research shows that a positive approach can enhance athletic performance. And we use the acronym, the ELM or the ELM tree of mastery, placing focus on the process instead of just the outcome. A lot of coaches use the scoreboard as a measure of success, and maybe they're not necessarily a win at all cost coach. It's just where their focus is, and maybe that's what they've been taught. So PCA teaches that effort, learning, and mistakes are okay is actually the best way to peak performance. Studies show that when athletes can focus on the controllables, they can perform better. And coaches can recognize and reward an athlete's effort, which is the E. Coaches can help athletes shift their mindset from a fixed mindset. If maybe an athlete doesn't think they can do something with more effort or hard work and coaching, an athlete can improve at a certain skill and have a more growth mindset. And athletes who are afraid to make mistakes, that can negatively impact their performance. So coaches can help them maybe come up with a mistake ritual, like a physical gesture that helps them move on mentally, like brush it off or even flush that mistake down the toilet. Another concept we teach is related to trust, is E-tanks, which is short for emotional tanks. You can't get very far on an empty tank, but if your emotional tank is full, there's so much potential. Athletes can really go anywhere. So E-tank strategies allow coaches to build trust, reinforce effort, and support the emotional needs of their players. Coaches can do a quick check-in each day to check the pulse. How is their athlete arriving to practice? Are they thumbs up? Are they so-so? Are they on an empty tank? And if they have an empty tank, you can adjust the game plan or strategy to just try to build them back up. We teach coaches and players to honor the game. The word ROOT is an acronym that stands for respecting the rules, opponents, officials, your teammates, and yourself. And things that sound simple aren't always easy. Some sports organizations and experienced coaches are resistant to training. Maybe there's an assumption that if a coach has playing experience or coaching experience, they already know how to work effectively with youth. But to coach today's athletes, coaches need more than just the knowledge of sports related skills and requirements like safe sport or concussion training. Our youth need coaches who understand the athlete's social, emotional, and development needs. And athletes who are growing up today are growing up in a different world with a new set of challenges and pressures from COVID and climate change to cell phones and social media. So participation doesn't automatically lead to positive outcomes. The research is clear, sports need to be done right. So even experienced coaches need ongoing training, education, and support so they can continue to develop and adapt their skills as the challenges their athletes struggle with shift and evolve. So positive youth development training is critical for coaches so that they can help create a healthy culture where all kids belong, so youth can show up to play with their friends, have fun, move their bodies, develop confidence, empathy, resilience, persistence, and belief in themselves through sports. And just imagine, what if every kid across the state could benefit from a positive youth sport experience with a coach who inspires them to be the best version of themselves in sports and in life? I really think that that's something worth working on together.
Thank you so much, Erica. I love that. Inspires our young people to be the best versions of themselves. I think so many of us have probably had an experience ourselves or have watched youth have that negative experience. So we really just appreciate you showing us what the possibility is. We are next up is JD Elquist. JD is the executive director and founder of Pacific Northwest Native Lacrosse, an Indigenous-led program dedicated to reconnecting Native youth with the creator's game. JD is going to talk to us about how Pacific Northwest Native Lacrosse uses the sport as a pathway for healing, pride, and cultural revitalization. Thanks, JD.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. JD Elquist. I'm Sukpiaq Alutik from Alaska native, and the executive director and founder of Pacific Northwest Native Lacrosse, and really honored to be with you this afternoon. So just a quick overview on who we are and what we do. PNW Native Lacrosse is going on to our third year of existence, and our three kind of big buckets are camps and clinics and tribal communities, and then we have an all-native travel team, which you can kind of see in some of these photos on the screen, as well as advocacy, so helping the broader lacrosse community understand that lacrosse is a native game and why that's important, what that means to them. But specifically, I'm here to talk about how we use the game of lacrosse to meet our Indigenous youth where they're at and have really important conversations around cultural revitalization, which we know offers, healing and medicine for our young people. So a little context on that, I've been playing the game of lacrosse for 23 years or so, and I found the game in seventh grade, right as a seventh grade youth, and it was my native ed teacher who offered me the game at that time. I did a little research and read some like documents that she gave me and just immediately like in here in my soul of who I am as a person connected to what the roots of this game are and what it means to me as a native kid. And I had a pretty challenging upbringing, lots of drug and alcohol abuse in my family, and this game is something that has quite frankly kind of saved me. And I'm kind of here to talk about why I think that is the case, right? So lacrosse comes from three primary different tribes across North America, what we call Turtle Island. We have the Haudenosaunee, we have which are now called the Iroquois, now called the Haudenosaunee, the Choctaw, Cherokee people down in the south, and some other tribes in that region that play a double stick game, and the Ojibwe people, and the Anishinaabe people in the Great Lakes region. Each of these tribes, approach the game of lacrosse from ceremony, right? It's known as medicine game or creator's game, little brother of war, and it's a deep kind of spiritual experience for a lot of these tribes. And in this game, the game of lacrosse is a part of a number of their creation stories as well. So that medicine of lacrosse, right, that we call medicine game or creator's game, is a part that I think is really important and the part that we're probably most emphasized and focused on as an organization. So we love to like introduce the gameplay of lacrosse, but our bigger piece is how do we bring in ceremony? How do we bring in cultural connection into this space? And what we know is that the more our youth are kind of reconnected to what it means to be Indigenous, the just more healing and the better off they're going to be long term. So one of the ways that we do that is we offer, smudging, we offer forms of prayer like drum and song into our spaces and try to bring in these kind of cultural practices that you see in Indigenous communities into a lacrosse space. And what's really cool is that when we do that, in the lacrosse setting, it's such a really awesome opportunity to have a bigger conversation about, where the game comes from and what it means. And what we know is that the more we can root our game of lacrosse on its roots and its indigeneity, the more that we can offer kind of that healing and that medicine and that kind of overall well-being conversation to anybody who's willing to have a conversation. So like this weekend, actually today after this call, I'm heading up to Seattle, and our all native travel team is playing in our sixth ever tournament as a club. So a fully indigenous program. And one of the things that we're really proud of is that we have, everything that we do is to no cost to our families and to our players, right? The only cost for travel teams is we can't quite afford to, fly and cover everybody's hotel, but we definitely we cover, the cost of registration, the uniforms, food, water, and all those things to really do everything we can to remove the barrier to play this sport, specifically for our Native youth, because our big, call to action is that if you're a Native person and lacrosse is a Native game, this is your game at the end of the day. And I think one of the big pieces I'm really focused on too is like how do we help the broader lacrosse community like relate and connect to that medicine, right? Which I think is really important. And the way that we put it is if you're willing to realize and to sit in the space of lacrosse and know that lacrosse is the medicine game and understand its indigeneity and understand where it comes from, that medicine that is for our people is that the same medicine could be for you, right? And it's something that we know if you play this game correctly and you play with a good mind, a good heart and joy, that the medicine of lacrosse is for really anybody who's willing to realize it. So that's about it for me. Really excited to continue this conversation. Really honored for the opportunity to be here. And feel free to follow us on Instagram or Facebook or find us online to kind of see what we're up to. But really honored to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JD. That like really warms my heart as a Osage Native person myself. I just think it's so powerful when we not only think about kids should have access to free sports and recreational opportunities, but what does it mean for them to really truly feel a sense of identity in that and be able to heal through a cultural practice that is so deeply in their genetics, right? So thank you so much, JD.
Thank you.
All right. We are moving on and speakers, we could take a breath just so you know, we're running a little bit ahead of time. So don't want you to feel like you have to, go too quickly. We have Jude Lorraine. Am I saying it right, Jude?
Close enough.
Close. Okay, you can correct me.
It,
Okay.
it's sort of a made up name by my family, so don't worry about it. Yeah.
Okay. Jude is the executive director of Disc Northwest, the country's largest community-based ultimate organization that is a home for players who value inclusive, accessible, and spirited play. Disc Northwest has helped make Ultimate one of the most popular and accessible sports in our state. And Jude is going to share with us about what has made that possible.
Yeah, thank you. I've really inspired by the first two presenters, their stories already, and I'm honored to be sharing this space with them. When people ask about what Disc Northwest does, it's really easy for me to get excited about listing all the programs and the leagues and the tournaments and all the stuff that our staff and volunteers do. But the real story is bigger than that. What we're trying to do is build a community where people feel like they belong, where young athletes can grow in healthy ways, and where adults feel a sense of shared responsibility for keeping the whole thing going. A big part of that has been rethinking how we as an organization measure our success. In youth sports, and especially in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of pressure to point to numbers. Do we have more teams and more players and more events each year? And growth becomes the metric that orgs look to because it's simple and it looks impressive, and it's especially when you're talking to like potential funders. But growth on its own can hide a lot. You can grow and still leave people behind. You can grow in ways that burn out coaches and staff. And you can grow so fast that the experience stops feeling welcoming or personal. At Disc Northwest, we're trying to move away from the more is better sensibility. And instead, we're trying to pay more attention to the quality of the experience, the relationships that are being built, the sense of safety and belonging that people feel, and the values that get passed from coach to player to community. And if we do those things well, then the growth will come organically. And that's one of the reasons that we have been investing and continue to invest so heavily in coach development. When I ask my friends to tell me about the best coaching that they had when they were kids, so many of them struggle to come up with a story really easily. But alternatively, when I ask them about their worst experience with a coach, those stories always seem to just be at top of mind. Everyone's got a dozen of them. And so, and we, and that illustrates that coaches are sort of the front door to sport for young people. A single practice or a conversation with a coach can shape how a kid feels about themselves in sport for years. So we're working internally at Dis Northwest and with our community to build systems and trainings that help coaches grow not just as instructors, but as mentors, as people who understand youth development, who know how to navigate harm and conflict, and who can create learning environments where players feel supported and seen. But on the flip side, we also know that none of that matters if people can't afford to show up, which is why we use a pay what you should fee model for everything. We want to make sure that like we're addressing that low-hanging fruit around accessibility and barriers to play by making sure that everyone can come no matter how much they can contribute financially. We want families to contribute in ways that reflect their actual financial reality, not what we assume it is. And so some people are going to can and will pay more because they believe in supporting the whole ecosystems, and others will pay less because that's what makes participation possible for them. The point isn't to hit a perfect number. It's about removing barriers and keeping our programs healthy and sustainable. Underneath all of this is the simple truth that inclusion and accessibility aren't things you solve once and then walk away from. It's an ongoing, messy, complicated work. It's about listening and adjusting and sometimes getting it wrong and trying again, and taking ownership of those mistakes. It's acknowledging that our community is made up of people with different needs and identities and histories, and that we have to keep learning how to make space for all of them. There's no real finish line there. It's just a long-term commitment to doing better together. So when I talk about Dis Northwest, yes, we run leagues, but it's more than that. We're trying to build an environment where the way we treat each other matters as much as the way we play, where success is measured not by the numbers, but by the strength, health, and inclusiveness of the community that we're building together.
Thanks so much, Jude. And just to share with folks, like early on when the coalition was trying to rethink about our payment scale for membership, we actually had a conversation with Jude about their sliding scale. And that actually is what where we borrowed our scale from. So I definitely just appreciate, Jude, your openness of sharing this process that you've gone through and being so willing to like help others do something similar. So thank you. Okay, lastly, we're going to hear from Sarah Wilhelm. Before I introduce her, I just want to remind everyone that we have a few prepared questions that we're going to ask our panelists after Sarah, but we do want you to throw your questions into the Q&A. If you don't see the Q&A icon, you might need to click the little 3 dots for more, and that might pull it up for you. So please put your questions there. Sarah Willem is with Public Health Seattle and King County and leads the King County's Community Wellbeing Initiative, advancing policy, program, and community partnership strategies to promote youth mental health. And that is what she's going to talk with us about today, how youth sport can be a vehicle to promote youth well-being. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much. As Tracy mentioned, I work with the Best Starts for Kids initiative here at King County. Best Starts is a voter-approved funding source and policy framework supporting the holistic health and well-being of children, youth, and young adults and families in King County. And my work specifically focuses on community-driven and equity-centered approaches to supporting youth mental health. And I'm just really excited to be a part of this amazing panel and share some thoughts about sports as a public health approach for youth well-being, because I think there's tons of potential for us to do more in this area. So youth sports can be a really important part of upstream promotion and prevention efforts related to youth mental health and well-being. At their best, I think sports touch on so many aspects of public health and well-being, from building lifelong interest in physical activity, to strengthening skills related to teamwork and social connection, which are so important in young people's development and growth, to building healthy strategies to cope with stress and the challenges that young people are facing right now, and providing positive identity development and leadership opportunities. There are just so many ways that a really positive sports experience can help our young people's development and growth. And ensuring that young people have access to high quality, inclusive, and supportive sports experiences can really play that critical role in supporting their holistic well-being and reducing the risk of more serious challenges as they grow and develop. And that's what we really mean by upstream promotion and prevention. We want to reach our young people early. As Tracy mentioned in the data, kids start playing sports young, and they offer a really important way for young people and children to build some of these social connections and relationships with caring and trusted adults early in their growth and development, and then continue on as they grow and progress. And they can really provide those early opportunities to develop healthy ways of coping with stress that can carry forward as they go into adolescence and life becomes more complex and often more challenging. And the data really show us that young people with even just one trusted adult in their lives have better mental health outcomes. And this is sort of a core part of the work that we do here at Public Health and Best Starts for Kids as we're thinking about supporting young people in their families and communities. Coaches are that trusted adult already for many young people. We know that. And I just want to affirm, most coaches, many coaches anyway, in youth sports are volunteers or at minimum are not paid a lot. And a lot of them are doing outstanding work to the benefit of their communities. And still, some might benefit from more support, right? Which is why we're all here. And more information and resources to do the work that they love. Most of them, I think, would not be doing it if they didn't love their own children and want to give back to their children's communities. And so we know the impact of coaches playing an important role in young people's lives. And I just want to also highlight that coaches who share lived experiences, culture, and identities with the young people they are working with can support positive identity development and community connections in really profound ways. And I think we heard about this from Pacific Northwest Native Lacrosse and Dis Northwest. And I think those are just such outstanding examples of that work already going on. And you'll see a graphic on this slide. The data show us that 7 in 10 King County teens overall do have a supportive adult in their life. Like I said, some of those are coaches. There is room for improvement here, and our coaches can help to bring that number up. And I also want to note that while this is the overall number for King County teens, we do see disproportionately lower numbers for our BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color young people due to the impacts of systemic racism and other forms of oppression. And you can see more detail by race ethnicity at a link to the source that I think is going to be put in the chat. And I just encourage folks to take a look at that data. It's always important to disaggregate data whenever we can. And supporting inclusive sports environments with caring coaches who are representative of the young people that they work with can have a really direct impact on closing these gaps and reducing the disparities, and then directly having an impact on young people's well-being as they grow. And I love Jude's emphasis on the sense of belonging that people feel, and how we use that as a metric. And I just wonder, what if we looked at things like sense of belonging and connection with a trusted adult as an evidence-based approach to measuring success in youth sports? I don't think that that's a pipe dream, and that's something that we could all, work towards together. And the data really back that up. up. And just on a personal note, I just wanted to end by saying I've really seen the difference this approach can make for my own mixed race children in South Seattle and their peers who are fortunate to play baseball, which can be a overwhelmingly white sport with Baseball Beyond Borders, which is a wonderful organization, and also to play Ultimate Frisbee with Disc Northwest and the Age Up program. And the sense of joy, belonging, and community they have playing the games they love with coaches who see them for their full selves is such a gift. And I am so glad to highlight the examples that we already have in this region. And I just see so much potential for growing that as we go forward. And yeah, I think that's all I have. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really love the first bullet here about the upstream promotion and prevention. I think most of us know this. Like we know it's not hard to talk to somebody who has somebody or has been in sports and understands the benefits. What we're hoping today is that we're really sharing that because often youth sports is seen as a privilege and not necessarily as a right. And so I really just appreciate that connection so we can really start to see the prevention aspect of it for our youth well-being. So thank you so much, Sarah. All right, folks, we're going to dive into some prepared questions, and we really look forward to getting some audience questions in the Q&A while we do that. We're going to take down the screen here, attempt to do so and spotlight all of our speakers for you all. Awesome, that worked great. All right, I'm going to start with Erica and Jude. I have a question about coaches and coach training. A lot of coaches are volunteers, as Sarah pointed out, and it can be really hard to require training, even though we know a trained coach can make a tremendous difference in kids' sport experience. How do you approach training volunteer coaches? Jude, let's start with you. What are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing that's really important, and we're Disc Northwest is pretty privileged to be able to offer this, but is to make that free. So all of our trainings are free, our background trainings are free, all of the stuff that is required, the coach compliance stuff like safe sport training and all of that stuff, we fund. And so that's a recognition that so many of these people are giving so much of their time already that asking them to further invest their own money in those processes is kind of a burden to them. So we've managed to make sure that stuff is all free for them. We also offer a series of coach development trainings. We are really lucky to have an awesome coach development director on staff who essentially just thinks about this stuff all day long. And so I such a great partner in this process. Shout out Alyssa. But then we're really looking to build kind of a more shared learning experience because we have a bunch of incredible coaches within our community. I see some of them in our crowd here right now. Shout out Jack, shout out Mark. And so we want to make sure that we create spaces for them to share their love for the game, their love for coaching, their experiences, both as really incredibly experienced coaches now, but kids who came up through the program who are going to help evolve it and make it more enriching and more rewarding because of what they learned and their experience, both positive and negative. Yeah, we're looking to build basically a coaching collective where we lean on each other to build each other up and make it feel like it's our shared responsibility to be good coaches and grow them.
That's amazing. I love it. It's also like a funnel of great coaches that you're developing. How about you, Erica?
Yeah, I love that, Jude, hearing just the collective and how you've got this culture already established at Disc Northwest. And I think that that's really powerful. And, we know time is a finite resource, and it may seem hard to ask volunteer coaches to invest more time for coach training. So finding ways to reduce barriers, like Jude was talking about, to make coach training as accessible as possible is really important. Making it free, covering the cost, consider different training formats. It's great to have in-person training where coaches can be in the room together having these conversations, younger, less experienced coaches learning from veteran coaches and vice versa. But there's also, if transportation is an issue. Having some live trainings over Zoom or self-paced online courses can be great where, coaches can have access to it at their own timeline. But I think part of it is making training part of your culture. This is just how we do things here. And we actually have a lot of organizations who mandate coach training. And although there may be some resistance to that initially, I think that the value that coaches get out of the training wins over most of the skeptics. And really, thinking about when your organization invests time and resources into coach training, it shows people that this is a priority for you. And talking about how coach training is an investment into the experience your young people have within your program. And not only is there evidence that quality coach training is a good financial investment, I mean, we see that there's an increased coach and athlete retention, more satisfaction amongst players and families. So there's a high return on investment, but there's also a high return on experience that these athletes can have that's just immeasurable. So, instead of dealing with unsportsmanlike incidents and complaints, you can have an increased number of comments about how classy and kid-friendly your program is and how well run your organization is with an investment in some of this training.
It's so true. And you see it on the field, right? On the court when it's going, when you have that, it's very easily to witness when that's going on. Thank you both. We heard in the last webinar that early specialization, early competition, and high cost of travel sports can prevent sports from being a place of youth well-being. So JD and Jude, how can programs like yours embrace holistic well-being when there is so much pressure on families to go to this ultra competitive route? We'll start with you, JD.
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think a lot about this. I think first and foremost, and I know it's probably a cliche answer, but I think what we're really focused on in our culture and Haudenosaunee culture specifically, one of the teachings is, there's the medicine game, there's creator's game, but there's this thought and this belief that the reason creator gave the game to his people is because he just wants to watch his people play his game for his joy, right? And I think joy being that really key component. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate sport, we overcomplicate play, and I think it's just truly about staying focused on joy first, right? And I think one of the things that we're really dedicated doing in our, especially kind of like initial programming, and what I've seen a lot of in a lot of sports that I've been around, specifically in lacrosse, when we're teaching kids a game for the first time, there's a tendency to like kind of over organize it or make it unnecessarily like kind of like drill driven. And what we like to do is we teach the fundamentals in a way that like, helps the kids connect, but we also just like put sticks in the kids' hands and let them play and let them kind of see what they do naturally and get away from here's a proper way to hold the stick and here's a proper way to scoop the ball and let them just kind of naturally connect. And then from there, we can help make things easier, saying, hey, why don't you try moving your hand down this way? And, there's some of those little adjustments. And our number one goal in every camp and clinic we do is get to play as fast as possible, right? So we want to stay away from skills and drills and move to play because what we know is the second a kid is playing and the second a kid laughs while he's playing or they're playing, then, joy happens and, the rest is history. And I think it, has to be fun. And I think from there, what happens is as a kid or as parents or as families are like, hey, we want to, continue down this path of lacrosse. What's next from here? We know that our foundation is in the right place that we can kind of help, create the next points of access. But yeah, for us, it's, joy first is, where we always start. So I'll pause.
Wow, joy first. I have these one-liners from y'all today. Joy first and get to play as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Can I borrow that, JD? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for the permission.
Mm.
All right, how about you, Jude?
Boy, that's a lot to follow up. That was really powerful. So yeah, thank you, JD. I think, a lot of what I'll do is just echo some of those sentiments around, just like emphasize the joy that we get from building a team experience together. But I won't say that we're not struggling with those same pressures within our community around like what does an elite athlete experience look like? Organizationally, that's not something that we really tackle. We don't have like club sport or club teams that are traveling that we organize. But when we moved out of that space as an organizer, other organizations moved into that vacuum because there's a demand. And so really what it is for us is trying to coordinate with those organizations and make them partners and just work with them to ensure that we're all kind of sharing the same values around what we're trying to do with sport. Knowing that there are kids and there are families that want that experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that experience is more valuable or less valuable than anything that you're doing recreationally or primarily with your school. And so it's just like working together, listening, talking, sharing experiences, and making sure that like in the end we're all hopefully working toward the same goal of building a community that honors players just for showing up, however they show up.
That's great. We don't have to see ourselves and other like the other groups as other, like that can't be brought along with us to learn from one another. So I really do appreciate that partnership. My last question is for Sarah and Erica. How can we spread the word about the role of high quality youth sports that plays into youth well-being? Who can help make sure sports are high quality and who can help increase investments and access into great programs? And let's get started with you, Sarah.
Sure, that is a great question. And I think some of the data I presented, sometimes data speaks to our decision makers, even though, as I think you mentioned, a lot of it is pretty intuitive, right? Like for those of us who've worked with children and youth and young people, these are intuitive concepts, but they also are evidence-based and data-backed. And so I think part of what we can do is use that data alongside the equally, if not more important stories that we have that we've heard today and can continue to hear directly from coaches and young people and people doing this important work. So I think local government, other funders and systems can continue to be in partnership with community-based organizations like DISC Northwest and Pacific Northwest Lacrosse. And there are, I think, many others who could be in partnership with us to just continue pushing on our current funding sources, future funding sources, to recognize the really critical importance that sports are playing for our young people. And just the reality by the numbers that you presented, Tracy, it's clear that sports are an important part of young people's lives, whether or not we invest in them and recognize them for the potential they can have for more powerful and ongoing change. So I think that's also really compelling. There's such a broad set of people that are touched by sports. And I think if we can just come together and tell a more cohesive story about really the power and potential for promoting health and well-being, I think there's lots we can do.
Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead, Erica.
A great question. And I'd say, talking to parents and caregivers and directly to sports leaders who are in the position to make decisions about what organizations will prioritize and invest in, both are important. Works with sports parents to talk about the power of positive sports parenting and skill development and mental wellness of their child. How to focus on the process instead of the outcome. It's like the same fundamentals that we teach coaches, we teach the parents, like the elm tree of mastery, rewarding effort and asking their child what they're learning from their practices and letting the athletes lead the way, maybe after a tough loss on the field and let the athlete lead the way when they're ready to talk about something versus, asking the question that all of us, it's easy to ask, did you win? How did you do? Focusing on those scoreboard outcome related questions. We also talk about the parent caregiver coach partnership and how parents can contribute to a welcoming team community. I think letting the coaches coach and seeing how you're both on the same page in terms of the expectations that you're going through, there's a great exercise that we have on our resource page on our website that's called the 100-point exercise. And having parents go through the exercise to say what your goals and expectations are, having your child go through that same exercise, and making sure that you're congruent and you're on the same page. I think it's very easy for parents who are investing in time and money and energy into sports to think that now it's time for my child to earn the college scholarship, or competing at a higher level, because that's the progression that they should be having. When in reality, maybe their child just wants to play with their friends, and if they are being moved up to another level, maybe the people that they want to be playing with, they're not even moving together. So keeping all those things in mind, I think can be really important.
Appreciate that. Actually, you all sort of answered the question that we did get, which was very similar to that. I'll say with the question as it's written. For more select club sports teams, how would you recommend encouraging building that culture of joy when the pressure from parents and boards are really focused on the win-loss records? The kids seem to be burning out so early. Right now, folks, you can add questions. That's the only question we have. So I don't know who wants to take on more than what Erica has already shared, but if you have something to add to that answer of like building the joy culture and kind of competing with that. Go ahead, JD. Thanks.
Yeah. I think it's just from a parent and coach standpoint, I think it's really important to like, again, we spend a lot of time like teaching the sport, right, or teaching the game or whatever. But I also think we spend more time like like mentally engaging our young people and having conversations and helping them like articulate why it is they're invested in the sport they play, why it is they enjoy playing it, and let them like tell us their feelings around it, right? And I think one of the things too is like if we let our kids feel more and not have to perform as much, I think that being able to express what you feel and your love or your joy or your frustrations or whatever they might be allows you to just like, keep it in a heart space and not make it performative. And I think that that helps with burnout from my standpoint, right? It's like even as a coach, like one of the big adjustments I had to make was I coached, high level travel lacrosse for a long time and still do. But, there's a tournament I was at where I was screaming at kids on a sideline and frustrated by a loss. And I went out to the parking lot and started crying, like as a coach, because I had like totally lost why I was in the game, right? And I think that reminder of like, we got to talk from in here about why it is that we do what we do and encourage our young people to do that.
Thank you, JD.
Hmm.
Okay, here's a question. What can communities do to kind of work on these issues? Do you start locally? We, as a coalition, we try to work on state level policy. What do you think communities can do to resolve some of these concerns and work towards these possibilities? Sarah, you want to take a first attempt?
Sure. I was just thinking about both the previous question and this question. I think what we're really talking about systems and culture change here, and that takes time. And I think there are some great examples. And part of the power of coming together around this issue and starting to get the word out more broadly is that things percolate around. We're all in communities and we're in teams. And we all do have power. I myself, I've never coached. I'm a parent of two athletes, and I got involved with the Little League board because there were some things that really needed to change in our culture. There was a lot of strength, but a lot of room for improvement. And I connected with just kind of community organizing, connecting with other parents who had similar concerns and wanted to see some change. And those are little local examples, but when we bring those little local examples together, we have something bigger. And someone else starts hearing about, oh, did you hear they did this over in this league? Maybe we could do that, and I think there's really a collective power and potential in youth sports for that reason, because again, like I said before, it touches so many people in so many ways. And yeah, I think for anyone who's wanting to see change. I just think, think about what small piece of the pie you might be able to influence. You don't need to change the world. You don't need to even be a coach yourself, right? There's lots of different ways that you can get involved. You can support organizations like the two that are here, or, and Baseball Beyond Borders. And there are many others doing great work already. Maybe that's the way that you get involved. But I think there's so many ways that we can all support each other and create a more collective movement.
Thank you. We have another question. Sorry, you want to say 2 second you both have a response. You both want to add before I ask the next question?
I just encourage people to, to work together. Some of the quality coach training that's out there, it's not sports specific. So when, coaches can come together from multiple organizations and a community to do the same training, there can be benefit, and you can learn from, different sports. You can learn from, people doing things a little differently than you, and that just raises the tide for everyone.
Just super quick. I think one of the things on the burnout and joy piece too is important is like if you have a kid who's learning a sport or like new to something, like learn with them, right? Be a part of that experience. Like pick up a stick and try, go out and play, move your body, and be part of their experience, because I think it's just again creates that bond and that connection to and that relationship that you can share together. And we every time we do a camper clinic, we invite any parent, grandparent who's hanging out on the sidelines to get up and move and come play with us, right? Because it's important to make it multi-generational.
That's great. And now the questions are pouring in. Okay. Do you know of any peer-to-peer efforts that have been done to focus on joy and fun, maybe coming from older youth or like young adults? Like, do you know of any, or do you know what that could possibly look like? Not really.
I know in one of our workshops, we talk about positive motivation and how that, that approach um, does have an impact. And a lot of that is research based. And so finding specific ways to focus on that, I think for coaches who, maybe they coach how they were coached, or they coach how, it was when they played. So being able to be open to some of those resources. And there's a lot of great resources on our website that you could check out, that you could search for the keyword that might have some of those themes.
Go ahead, Jude. You wanted to also.
Yeah, this is not exactly peer to peer, but it's about intentionally creating spaces for young coaches to come in. I think that that's a really powerful thing. And I think that some organizations are a little bit threatened by that, about new voices coming in with new visions for what the future of the sport should be. And I just think you need to really make sure that you are taking down whatever barriers there are to make room for new and excited coaches. They're not necessarily peers, but they bring a peer-like perspective sometimes, and can create really powerful relationships with young players and new players. I want to shout out specifically Mark Munoz, who's here, who actually coached my daughter twice over the last couple of years, and those are really, really important moments for her and her development around her just identity as an athlete. And so that is not necessarily an experience like that's Mark is someone that grew up around my daughter as she was growing up, and now he's like a really trusted mentor for her. And so just make sure that you're making space for new, excited, evolving voices.
I think that's so great. We worked with trying to get more women as coaches, and what we learned is that women are just not asked. And a lot of women aren't asked on the sidelines when they're watching a game if they would be interested, even if they're providing critical feedback, from the sidelines. And so just the same with young people, when they're a senior in high school, how many of them do we ask, to come back and participate at a coach level? That's great. Another question is, could your panelists talk a bit more about how you measure success? Jude made a great point that more is not always better, but how do you demonstrate success when it comes to those less tangible outcomes? And how do you communicate that success to your stakeholders? Go ahead, JD.
Yeah, I think one of for us, a measure of success is cultural connection, right? So like, when we and it's a small measurable thing, but for us, it's like, there's a young man who started playing lacrosse with our organization who's a Puyallup tribal member, and then we talk a lot about culture and dance and prayer and all these things, and now he's dancing powwow and he's drumming and he's singing, and we see that his mom shares photos. So for us, like that's the ultimate win, like it's less about lacrosse, more about his connection to culture because that's what we're driving at. So. Yeah, it's just, for us, we keep track of all these things and we have, these tangible real life experiences that we can talk about. And he's just one example of, many times this has happened for us.
Thanks, JD. Storytelling. I hear that also as like part of your answer, like telling folks the story of our young people.
I think one thing we could point to is the Positive Youth Sports Culture Index, which is, something that we have developed that is a measurable that people within the organization can take a look at and look at the different relationships, look at the outcomes, have a bunch of different people from within your organization fill this out. We've even had schools fill this out where one of the custodians is going to fill it out because they're in the background, but they see a lot of what's going on. And so if you can just really open up to any of the blind spots that you might not know about by getting different levels of feedback, that can be really powerful and just point these things out to the stakeholders, the organizational leaders, things that might not be in their periphery right now.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, we have one more question. A 2-minute answer. Where did it go? Oh, how can we recruit more immigrant coaches and support coaches to be more aware of cultural issues? It's a great question. Who wants to tackle? 2 minutes. Pressure is on.
I'm not sure I have an answer, but I know that's something, and just in general, in terms of integrating with newcomer communities, it's something that we're continuing to struggle and try to grow around. One of the things that Ultimate has specifically faced is that it's a very white forward sport. Our youth community in Seattle is very diverse, and that's something that we continue to invest in, and really happy to have partners. Incredibly honored to have partners like Age Up who are really good at helping us figuring out where we can make space. But generally, I would say that like it starts with like looking at your own organization first and what have you done? What kind of processes do you have in place to like take actual honest accountability for the barriers that you create for the like especially around like being a sport like us that was mostly played nationally and internationally by white folks, by affluent white folks. So it's not necessarily a space that feels automatically welcoming to folks. And so some of that stuff we can take care of and we can continue to work on. And some of it is like just doing an honest like assessment of where you are. Are you ready to safely make space for folks who might not initially be welcome, and what restorative practices do you have in place to help those folks when harm does happen, because it's going to happen.
Thanks so much, Jude. I appreciate the acknowledgement of like being prepared, especially if you are not an immigrant ran and led organization, right? So I appreciate that. All right, folks. We don't have time for the rest of the questions. Apologies. Julie may possibly attempt to write answers in the chat if you stay a little bit longer. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to our panelists. What you have shared has been so inspiring and powerful. In closing, we have a few reminders. Over 50% of youth who play sports deserve high quality, fun, supportive sports experience. And the other 50% who aren't playing deserve access if they want it. On the screen, you'll see we have a QR code. If you could please fill out our exit ticket. I don't know if it's possible the link is in there as well. Monica put it in there. We hope and look and want you to look out for next year. We will be putting out in 2026 a Washington State parent survey that will include questions around youth sports. It'll be the first ever, so we can have more data to guide us. And we are going to finish 1 minute early. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks again to our amazing panelists. We'll stick around if some of you have some questions. But other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you.